Welcome to Gentle Musings, a podcast for sensitive, creative people finding their way through this world and living out loud, living life as your imperfect, wonderful creative self from the inside out. I'm Maggie. If we're new to each other, I'm the founder of Regarding Dew, that's D-E-W, like the morning dew. This is a creative research studio where I offer creative coaching and courses on growing a writing practice, living a creative life, meeting the smallest moments of your day with compassion and curiosity. If you consider yourself creative to your core, a deep feeling or sensitive person, if you care a lot, if you're someone who carries creative longing with you and creative resistance that's as big as your creative longing, then you're in the right place. And I'm so glad that you're here. So thank you for tuning in. In my home, we have what we call our summer den, and this is really just the dining room. And in the window, we have our trusty little air conditioner who works hard all day long, and on most days can barely get it under 84 Fahrenheit, so like 28 kind of Celsius. It's the coolest room that we have in the summertime. We've embraced it like a temporary studio apartment. Grateful for the window AC. Even with the summer cabin fever, have you also been feeling this summer cabin fever where it's too hot to even go outside? I know the people who bike and walk a lot can definitely relate to this. My writing chair is relocated in here. To my left, there's an old room divider to partition off the kitchen's heat. One thing that I loved about living in Germany was how many doors an apartment had. A door to the kitchen, a door to the living room, a door to the foyer or the hall. Open and close the doors to direct air and sound and scent. They removed all of the extra doors in this place. So the doors that would contain the living room, it's gone, and the kitchen. So we have this old divider. It's a very Zen style, is what I tell myself, for our summer den. We have a mood light, just trying to embrace it as I have an ice pack on my forehead most days. And it's in this room, in the height of the summer, that I decided that I want to start knitting again. It's time to start knitting again. And I've been thinking a lot about creative piles lately. I've been writing about creative piles. I'll have that linked if you're someone who makes creative piles or feels overwhelmed with all of your ideas and the stuff of being creative. I couldn't help but think about my old knitting projects and yarn. And I've been meaning to finish a scarf made from yarn that I dyed by hand, that I managed to put off for 6 years. 6 years, people. I know that some of you might have projects that have been abandoned for longer. I certainly do, but this one was, it was one of those moments when I was like, what, 6 years? How did that even happen? To be fair, I moved in that time, a lot of times back and forth internationally also, so most of my stuff was in storage or it was tucked away. I kept telling myself, when the days get calmer, when there's time, if you can relate to this, I was doing that. I was deferring it, and just trying my hand at knitting again was not a top priority. I probably could have benefited from it in all of that time, but it wasn't a priority for me. So when I pulled my knitting out of that bag, it's this thin teal bag that I hand stitched that one. There was this moment of like, oh, there it is. And it felt so nice to see that woven pattern. I'll have it linked, the pattern, by the way, if you are a knitter and you're curious to see. Also, there's a photo of the scarf. The woven pattern, and then to run my hand over the knobbly edges since I'm still learning. And then I saw the gap in my scarf, a little window, a little feast that was had by a moth. For the people who don't knit, who are listening to this or reading this or watching this if I share the video, frogging is the process of ripping out stitches. You get it? Like rip it, rip it, rip it, rip it. It's frogging. As a beginning knitter, frogging to me has always meant utter defeat, a sign of failure. And the more that I learn from knitters and the more stitches that I've sacrificed, the more I see frogging as an important part of the creative process. It's kind of like with writing. If you just write for long enough, if you produce enough writing, you get to this point when you're tossing out sentences that you love. And you might even be losing work, or just recognizing that the thing that you work so hard to put together, it doesn't work, and something has to be undone. Something has to be frogged. The little moth feast, though, it wasn't near my needles, which means less frogging. It was on the complete other end of the scarf. And I think that there are ways to frog, like reverse frog, so that you can maintain the stitches. I'm not even doing that. I'm not even looking it up. I was like, whatever. It's a fresh start for me. I have just completely surrendered to it. It's a fresh start. The yarn is being treated, and I've made a vow to myself that I will not wait another 6 years until I knit that scarf, but I'm starting again after the yarn has been, thoroughly taken care of. So this is just one little thing in my creative universe that has kind of felt like it's gone wrong. And I've been really aware of the thoughts of judgment and discouragement. And this is what I've been doing: noticing the thoughts, catching when the thought happens, which means having some distance from it, not being in it, noticing that that's happening, and then returning to a more compassionate stance. And so this doesn't mean that I don't feel frustrated and I don't feel disappointed and regretful for neglecting this project for so long. And it doesn't mean that I'm searching for the bright side of, well, look at it this way, or this is something else I can be grateful for. It's not about that. The way that I meet less than gracious thoughts in the creative process is by letting them be there. So a really helpful practice that I use all the time, and I'll offer it here to you, is to name what's happening. The first part of that is to ask what's happening. What's going on? What's happening up here? What am I believing? What are my thoughts doing? And then name what's happening. Disappointment is here. Frustration is here. A belief of ... whatever it is here. Okay, those are very real parts of any creative process. We're not needing to get rid of them. Deeper than the part of myself that's disappointed and frustrated is the part of myself that's committed to making beautiful things for as long as I can. I am committed to creative resilience and compassion as forever practices. So I hope that Mrs. Moth enjoyed her little snack, and I'm actually looking forward to just starting fresh with this. Also, a loving reminder to myself, to you if you need it, whether you're a knitter or not a knitter, have the cedar, have the lavender, have the cloves, keep them by your woolen items, whether they're yarn or like your scarves, off-season, sweaters. And because of this surprise that I found this week, I felt inspired to reread for myself something that I wrote in the spring called Your Creative Process is Not a Problem. And I read this on video before, and I posted it on YouTube. I know some people like things in audio form instead, so I want to have this up as part of the Gentle Musings podcast. And I'm going to read it on camera. I don't know if I'll share that, but I'm going to do that to practice being on camera. And I might just post the video again. I don't even know. Here's the thing. If you haven't heard it and you're listening to this, then here it is. I'm glad that you can hear it. I hope that it finds you at the right moment when you need it. And I'm willing to be a broken record about certain things. And this is one of them, which is the things that we tell ourselves and have been taught and have internalized of what our personal failings or what's a problem or what's a sign of stopping isn't. It's part of the process. Okay. Here it is. Your creative process is not a problem. We've been taught to pathologize so many of the experiences that make us dynamic, fallible, lovable, evolving humans, and the same goes for the utter chaos that is creativity. A common shared experience in the creative process can so quickly become labeled as a scathing evaluation of one's own worth. So incoming is a list of parts of the creative process that cause distress and frustration, and some of what I'm sharing are sources of intense suffering. Stay with me here. What I'm getting at in this thought experiment is drawing a distinction between what is experienced the very real frustrations and suffering, and how the mind categorizes the experience. Often in some form of feeling fundamentally lacking, broken, bad, unlovable, more often than not, the inclination of the mind seems to label uncomfortable experiences in the creative process as problematic. Not only problematic, but personal failings. It becomes, this clearly isn't for me, I should finally get the picture, forget about it for good, why am I even trying? All of this. Writing this piece was a very catch the beat kind of experience. It felt good to put it into words. And before getting into it, let me just say this, that right after making this list, I thought to myself, this is such an annoying way to format my thoughts, and I'm going to annoy the person reading it and maybe agitate them because I'm making assumptions about their creative process and thought process in an annoying list. And while I have no idea about the layered ways in which you experience your creative process in this season, what I'm sharing comes from being a full-time creative confidant. I'm in conversation with people in the deep waters of their creativity and hear some variation of these experiences every day. So back to that annoying little critical voice that tells me it's better to file this away with everything else that I've very temporarily deemed unshareable. This habit of telling myself, don't say that, is also not a problem. It's a predictable part of my process, and it's usually a sign that I have been consuming too much online. Onward, forward, and I'm starting with some biggies. The first one is that not feeling creative enough is not a problem. It's part of the process. This goes for both feeling a gap in your sensibilities and skills, as well as having a fraught relationship to the expectations of capital W writer, capital A artist, musician, etc. When people stop debating their creativity on a fundamental level, this is what I usually see: angst about not being creatively productive enough. Not feeling creatively productive or prolific enough is also not a problem. It's part of the process. Creativity has a way of unraveling fixations on efficiency. Being afraid of doing it wrong, as in saying the wrong thing or being wrong in some vague way that could jeopardize belonging or appreciation, and wanting so badly to get it right, is not a problem. It's part of the process. A favorite line by Martha Graham that touches on all of these, quote, "No artist is pleased. There is no satisfaction whatever at any time. There is only a queer divine dissatisfaction, a blessed unrest that keeps us marching." Realizing that you have been wrangling one sentence for 20 minutes isn't a problem. It's part of the process. Same applies to stripping a canvas, frogging and knitting, and pulling out a sunken cake from the oven. Typos are not a problem. It's part of the process. That's sometimes part of the outcome also that you find after you publish something. I'm reserved in groups of people, but I definitely would scream this out on a stage if I had a stage. That typos are definitely not a sign that you lack seriousness or rigor or smarts. Writers make typos. Typos are the beauty marks of writing. And for what it's worth, I write hours a day, both typing and by hand, and I misspell and skip words and switch letters around all the livelong day, especially with all of these little function words, like the, that, it, in, are, as. It's a jumble fest. And between me and me, it's not a problem that my brain does this. Resistance is not a problem. It's part of the process. Wanting to throw away your efforts in the middle of a project when it loses its novelty and momentum and you're bored out of your mind isn't a problem. It's part of the process. Getting excited about an idea and then working on it for hours and then forgetting about it and then finding it 6 months later or 6 years later isn't a problem. It's part of the process. Working on something all night and returning to it in the morning only to have a what the fuck is this moment isn't a problem. It's part of the process. You get the idea, yeah. Forgetting what works for you and then trying to do something different that you feel like you should do, or something that's shinier than what actually works for you, and then feeling frustrated that you keep dropping or forgetting what works is not a problem. That's just part of the process. And this gives you the gift of returning to yourself and your practice in a fresh way. Communing with loneliness in your creativity isn't a problem. It's part of the process. Sitting down to work and all that you can think about is a random thing that your mind globs onto, like grocery store prices or falling down in math class in 10th grade. Yeah, that, still remember that one. The Mandela effect. And oh, is that what they meant when they said that thing at that party, or that, whatever. What was that one song that the Sundays sang? Whatever your mind latches on to, it isn't a problem. It's part of the process. Feeling like you've never started before and you can't even grasp how to think about starting isn't a problem. It's part of the process. A lot of the expectations we have around, or I'll say this, commonly held expectations around what it means to be an artist or a writer, is just a musician, any of these, is just to sit down and start working on the craft. And having this ease in the ritual is a sign that, yeah, you're creative enough, you're doing it, And I talk to people all the time that are prolific in what they make and are masterful in what they make and make money off of what they make sometimes. And they forget how to start. Or their starting rituals, sometimes they have them. It's not always smooth going. A lot of times it can be really bumpy, It's part of the process. So I just want to name the starting of it, because that's a point where shame can really take root. Wishing for ideal conditions to work on your work isn't a problem. It's part of the process. Waiting for the ideal conditions is a problem, because then you're not making what's yours to make, and we need that. Racking up rejection after rejection after rejection, whether it's a rejection of acknowledgement, like crickets, or formal submission rejections, and feeling utterly hopeless isn't a problem. It's part of the process. I think about rejection in the creative field as a rite of passage into deeper humility and faith in your work. Thinking of how Van Gogh traded paintings and had some work commissioned by relatives, but only sold one painting in his life after exhibiting it. One painting. And so that's really bleak for me to share, but my point is that rejection is part of the process. I'm thinking about E.E. Cummings' No Thanks poem, if you want to look that up, if you don't know that one, No Thanks poem. Liz Gilbert's line, quote, "There are people who haven't even been born yet who are gonna reject me someday. That's how long I plan to stick around." I want to say, it's hard for me to read these things and not interject. I'm really trying to hold my tongue. I just want to say something about rejection, especially when it comes to submissions, is that I don't want to gloss over the value of being plugged into networks, and that some people have that because they could afford to go to really expensive schools, or their parents are plugged into those networks, or they're very close friends, or whatever that is, whatever the connections. I don't want to gloss that over in terms of having various gatekeepers welcome you in. Just on a more fundamental level, I'm naming that feeling like you're failing and having work sent back to you, or having the crickets, having things not land, just feeling like in the process, it's comprised more of failure than of successes. That is part of the process. Not a problem. Learning how to do things in a way that works for you through iteration after iteration over years, trial and error, isn't a problem. It's an exquisite part of the process. What if the parts of the creative process that are so easy to feel aversion toward aren't wrong? What if willingness to meet these parts through using creative practices like resourcefulness and curiosity and intuition is an essential part of the process? What if this is the juiciest fruit of your harvest? In naming what's not a problem, I, out of integrity, want to name some of the things that are, specifically because of, the burden on the individual, just naming these as part of a larger system. That what is a problem is the decline of arts education in schools. Being told that creative longings are frivolous or indulgent. Addictive technology that drowns out the creative impulse. creative pursuits being measured only by their market value, not being able to afford singing, dance, drawing, music lessons because of not being paid a living wage, and a culture where loneliness and disconnection have become the status quo, where it feels normal to not have friends in your life who celebrate and get you and your creative vastness. We get to choose to be this for ourselves and others. Thank you for listening. If you have a friend that could be a little less harsh on themselves and more trusting of their process, please send this along to them or share this on social media if you think it could help someone, if it was useful to you. Or let me know in the comments. I really stand for creative practices and getting to know the nature of the creative process, especially for you and your idiosyncrasies, as an unshaming practice, as a practice of freedom, and as a refuge. So soon I will share about ghosting projects, returning to them, that whole situation. If you're not subscribed yet and you want to hear that, please click that button to receive notifications of new episodes. And also, if you want to leave any comments around a project that you have put off for a long time, maybe a project that you really feel like you've abandoned, if you want to share about that in the comments, any challenges that would be helpful to have addressed, feel free to do that. And 2 things that are happening this summer at the time of recording. It's Pay What You Wish time for creative coaching. We focus on themes like self-trust, moving through creative resistance and perfectionism, taking creative risks, being more you, getting into the flow. This is based in curiosity, and I'll ask you a lot of breakthrough questions, and you'll get really clear in one session. So if you want to book that for yourself or tell friends, the link is below. Those are filling up, and I opened up a few new spots midweek, but you'll see that when you click the link, I ask a few questions and you reflect on what would be most meaningful for you to focus on, and then we'll move on from there. The second thing is that doors are open to the Creativity Lab, where you can transform your creative ideas into reality without waiting for permission or getting stuck in resistance. This is 4 weeks of creative accountability so that you can make what you're here to make and know that you are creative enough as you are. You're in good company. This is your sign to stop waiting to feel ready enough and figuring it out alone. You get to be your full creative self without needing to feel like a real artist first or having a perfect plan. The groups are small on purpose, and they're filling up because we're starting soon. So if you are interested, I encourage you to check that out today and save your spot soon if you would like to spend your fall in that way and make some really cool creative assignments that you design yourself. We'll figure out all of the details together, and you'll have support every step of the way. That all the information is below as usual. Thank you for listening. Until next time, take really good care.